Hi, my name is Aloan. Last Thanksgiving, my parents told me, not asked me, to cook like I was their servant. No thank yous, no help. Just silence, and expectations stacked like dirty dishes. So, I wrote a note and disappeared. What they found on that table the next day. It wasn't turkey or stuffing. It was everything they refused to see, staring back at them in plain sight. Now they call it betrayal. But if standing up for myself is betrayal, then what do you call what they did to me all those years? Would you have stayed? Or would you have vanished too? The sky over Eugene carried that soft silver glow that only happens in early November, where the air smells faintly like wet pine and chimney smoke. I had just poured my first cup of coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my mother, Seraphine. Same plan for Thanksgiving, right? You know how your kitchen just works best. I stared at the screen. No emojis, no greeting, no question mark. Just certainty. Like always. I took a slow sip and reread the message 3 times, hoping that maybe this year she'd added something different, something like, "How are you doing?" Or, "Would you like to host again?" But no. It wasn't an invitation. It was an instruction dressed up like family tradition. For 7 years, the Morse family Thanksgiving had defaulted to my house. Not because I offered, but because it was practical. My kitchen was efficient, my dining table the perfect size. What they really meant was, Aloan will do the work and won't complain. I set the mug down and tried to ignore the dull twist in my chest. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Outside, the wind scattered the last of the maple leaves across my porch. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked twice before going quiet again. I thought of replying with something casual like, "Sure thing," but my fingers wouldn't move. They treat me like the family maid, not the daughter. That thought came uninvited, but it landed with truth heavy enough to make my eyes sting. I'm 37, I reminded myself. A grown woman, a graphic designer, someone who pays her own mortgage, and even remembers to change the air filters on time. But in my family's eyes, I was still the baby, the one who could be volunteered for anything. I opened the fridge, pretending to be busy. The light flickered against containers of leftovers and a half-empty carton of milk. I wasn't hungry. I just needed to move. My mind, however, had already gone back a year. Last Thanksgiving, when I peeled 10 pounds of potatoes while my siblings lounged in the hot tub outside, their laughter rising through the kitchen window like steam. My father, Vera, had leaned in through the doorway and said, "We're lucky to have our little helper." Everyone laughed. I smiled because that's what I was supposed to do. But later that night, as I scraped congealed gravy from the pans, I had caught my reflection in the kitchen window, tired, grease on my cheek, eyes dull, and wondered when I had become invisible. The microwave clock blinked 9:42 a.m. I picked up my phone again, typed, "Actually, I was thinking maybe someone else could host this year." Then I deleted it. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment before I set it face down. The vibration came again almost instantly, this time from the family group chat. A message from Callista, my older sister. "Mom says we'll bring wine and dessert again. You just handle the rest. You always do it so well." Of course. I didn't even bother replying. A new notification popped up above it, a family graphic that my brother Zinnia had made, some sort of cheesy Thanksgiving invitation with clip art turkeys and falling leaves. I opened it out of habit. At the bottom, it read, "Hosted by Seraphine and Paul Morse at Aloan's house." Except my name wasn't spelled Aloan. It was Eloan. I stared at that one extra letter like it was a bruise. No one corrected it. No one noticed. I closed the image, turned off the phone, and set it aside. The rest of the morning passed in fragments. I worked half-heartedly on a client logo, something for a boutique candle company, but every time I looked at the glowing screen, my mother's text hovered behind it like a watermark. Around noon, the laptop chimed again. This time, it was Leora calling. My cousin. My only real ally in the family. I clicked accept, and her face appeared, backlit by the California sun. "Please tell me you're not cooking again this year," she said before even saying hello. I smiled faintly. Guess what text I got this morning? Oh no. She rolled her eyes. The annual commandment? Exactly. Elle, why do you still let them treat you like that? I sighed. Because it's easier than arguing. Her eyebrows lifted. Easier for them, not for you. I leaned back in my chair. You know how Mom gets when I push back. She'll guilt trip me, make it about how family traditions matter and how I'm overreacting. Then Dad will step in with his peacekeeper voice and say, let's not ruin Thanksgiving. That's not peacekeeping, Leora said, shaking her head. That's control disguised as harmony. I didn't answer. Leora softened her tone. You don't owe them your exhaustion, Elle. We talked for another half hour about her new apartment, her dog, life far away from family drama. When the call ended, I sat there for a while, letting the silence fill the room. Maybe she was right. Maybe easier wasn't the same as better. Later that evening, after dinner, a reheated bowl of soup and crackers, I opened my laptop again. I wanted to clear some emails before bed. The inbox blinked with a new subject line, Thanksgiving duties, Eloan station list. I froze. It was from Callista, CC'd to everyone. Attached was a color-coded spreadsheet. I clicked it open. Turkey, Eloan. Stuffing, Eloan. Mashed potatoes, Eloan. Cranberry relish, Eloan. Cleanup, Eloan. Every task, every single one. And then, in a comment bubble beside the cranberry relish. Just make sure Eloan doesn't mess it up like last year. Winky face. My jaw tightened. I could almost hear them laughing about it. The spreadsheet scrolled endlessly downward, as if mocking me with its organization. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. I closed the laptop slowly, hands trembling. Not from fear, but from something sharper. A quiet fury that hummed beneath my ribs. I walked to the living room and turned on the small lamp by the couch. The glow softened the room, but my thoughts felt jagged. The family photos on the walls stared back. Birthdays, weddings, holidays. I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. In every picture, I was either serving food, holding a tray, clearing plates, or standing in the corner. Always in motion, never present. My throat tightened. I whispered to the empty room. This year, I'm not sure I'll show up at all. The words echoed, small but certain. I stood there for a long time, listening to my own breath and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the sky deepened into dusk. A thin crescent moon hovered over the neighbor's roof, and somewhere, a car door slammed, breaking the quiet. I picked up my mug from earlier, cold coffee now, and carried it to the sink. As the water ran, I caught my reflection in the window again. Tired, yes. But something else too. Determined. This year, I thought maybe tradition wasn't worth the cost. I didn't just mean not showing up physically. I meant emotionally, spiritually, entirely. The thought lingered as I woke the next morning to a slate-gray sky and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I moved through my kitchen as if on autopilot, poured coffee, checked emails, and eventually grabbed my car keys. Even though I hadn't agreed to host Thanksgiving this year, old habits pulled me toward routine. 2 days before the holiday, and I was already at the grocery store. The sliding doors whooshed open, letting out the familiar chill of overconditioned air and the faint smell of cinnamon-scented displays. My cart rattled slightly as I pushed it past the produce section. I wasn't shopping for myself. I was buying the ingredients my mother had suggested I pick up. It wasn't a request, just another unspoken expectation. Cranberries, pie crust, her favorite brand of stuffing mix. At the checkout, the woman scanning items glanced up and smiled. Wow, hosting again? You must really love it. I forced a polite smile back. Yeah, something like that. She laughed lightly, unaware that her words hit a bruise. Hosting again, like I had a choice. I nodded, swiped my card, and thanked her before loading everything into my trunk. Driving home, the radio played soft holiday jazz, Silver Bells, or something equally hollow. My fingers tapped the steering wheel, my mind far from the road. Memories crept in, uninvited but relentless. I thought about my first Thanksgiving back from college. I'd driven 8 hours from Portland, exhausted but eager to see everyone. When I arrived, my room had been turned into a playroom for Callista's twins. My suitcase sat in the hallway, and Mom had said, "You don't mind sleeping on the couch, right? You're the flexible one." Flexible. That word had followed me for decades. It meant my plans didn't matter. My comfort could be rearranged for others. "You're the flexible one" was just a polite way of saying, "We won't consider your needs." The traffic light turned red, and I stared at the windshield wipers sweeping across tiny bits of rain. My reflection looked older than I remembered, tired, but sharper somehow. Maybe awareness aged you faster. I turned down my street, parked, and carried the bags inside. The smell of rain clung to my coat. As I unpacked, I caught sight of an old photograph pinned to the fridge, a family Thanksgiving years ago. I was there, in the background, mid-laugh, holding a tray of rolls. My mother sat at the head of the table, her nails painted, smile perfect, her wine glass raised. I could almost hear her voice. Family means tradition. But tradition felt more like obligation now. After putting away the groceries, I sat on the couch and scrolled through old photos. The years blended together, same decorations, same menu, same me standing behind everyone. Somewhere between 2014 and 2019, I had stopped being visible. One photo made me pause. A Thanksgiving when my birthday had fallen that same week. I remembered making my own cake, because no one else had. They'd sung "Happy Birthday" absent-mindedly while washing dishes. The same year, Zinnia had a cake delivered to the house for his dog's birthday. The memory was ridiculous and cruel at once. I'd smiled through it then, because smiling was easier than making everyone uncomfortable. Now, that smile cracked wide open in my mind. I reached for my phone and searched through old voicemails, half curious, half masochistic. One caught my eye, dated years ago, the week of that forgotten birthday. My father's voice. "Sorry, kiddo. Just too much going on. We'll celebrate next time."
Next time.
There had never been one. I pressed delete and let the silence fill the room. As afternoons stretched into evening, the clouds thickened. I made tea and tried to focus on a freelance project, but my thoughts kept drifting. The dull buzz of my phone startled me. It was a new voicemail. Unknown number. I pressed play. "Hey, Mom," my brother's voice said, faint and distant. "Did you tell Aloan what time to come?" Then my mother's voice, clearer, answering, "She knows. She lives for this kind of stuff. Cooking is the only thing she's good at." Laughter followed. Then silence. I froze, mug halfway to my lips. My heartbeat stumbled. I replayed it. Once, twice, 3 times. Each word carved a little deeper until the edges of the room blurred. Cooking is the only thing she's good at. There it was. The truth behind the politeness. The love wrapped in insult. But what struck me most wasn't the cruelty. It was the familiarity. I'd heard variations of that line my entire life, through compliments, jokes, even hugs. I took a deep breath, the kind that shakes on the way out. Then something strange happened.
I didn't cry.
I didn't yell. Instead, I felt still. Quiet. A realization slipped in like a whisper. This message wasn't left by accident. I checked the voicemail details. It had been forwarded. Someone in that family wanted me to hear it. Maybe Zinnia. Maybe Callista. Maybe even Mom herself. The thoughts settled like dust, impossible to sweep away. That night, just as I was considering deleting it, a knock came at the door. Leora stood outside, wrapped in her brown coat, holding a half-empty bottle of red wine. "You're not gonna believe the traffic," she said, stepping in. "Everyone's losing their minds before Thanksgiving." I managed a weak smile. "You picked a good night to visit." She followed me to the kitchen. I poured 2 glasses, my hand steadier than I expected. Without speaking, I pressed play on the voicemail. When it ended, silence filled the space between us. Leora's expression hardened. "That's psychological servitude, Elle. This isn't family, it's conditioning." I stared at the counter. "What would you do if you were me?"
She didn't hesitate.
"I'd disappear for Thanksgiving. Leave a note." Let them choke on their own cranberry sauce. I laughed, but it came out flat. You make it sound easy. It's not, she said softly. But staying is killing you slowly. Her words landed like a final chord that hung in the air long after the music stopped. After she left, I tidied the kitchen mechanically, rinsed our glasses, wiped the counters. The night had turned cold. Wind pressed against the windows. I looked around my quiet house, at the dining table that had hosted so many years of forced gratitude. The chairs looked like witnesses, waiting for another performance. I sat down with my laptop, the screen glowing pale in the dark. My reflection hovered over the blank document. I titled it Thanksgiving Planned 2.0. For a long while, I didn't type anything. I just stared. Somewhere deep inside, a switch had flipped. The obedient daughter was gone, replaced by someone I hadn't met yet but was starting to like. Maybe this year, I thought, the only tradition I'll honor is my own peace. I closed my eyes and began to type. I called it Plan 2.0, but really it was my declaration of freedom. Late that night, after I'd set the teacup aside and watched the steam curl into the cold air of the house, I sat at the desk where I'd once sketched logos and menu layouts for my family's festivities. Now the screen stood blank, the cursor blinking, taunting me. Something inside shifted. I typed the header, Thanksgiving Plan 2.0. The words tasted different than any menu I'd ever prepared. I moved through each cell as if building an escape route rather than a seating chart.
Who was expected to arrive?
What indulgent dishes I always prepared. The schedule I never signed up for but always followed. And then my exit strategy. I underlined in bold. Serve them nothing but the truth. Not the prescribed devotion they expected. Not the silent sacrifices I wore like armor. The truth. In the next hour, I cleared out the cupboards, holiday-air dishes I'd been too polite to question. The crystal bowl passed down, the silver platter stamped with our family name. I tucked them into the attic, stored away. The tablecloths embroidered with Morse family that had made countless photos. I bagged them and set them aside. The little spice jars I always replaced each November, so my mother would say, "You do it like no one else can." I donated those too. By early dawn, I drove to the grocery store, not to load up the oven, but to check off the list. Though halfway through, I would donate the entire cart to the food bank so that no one suspected. They believed I was prepping as usual. That belief was my cover. In the mirror later, I rehearsed the words I might use if someone asked why. I'm not angry. I'm just done. The reflection stared back, weary yet stark. No tears. No breakdown. It was the kind of moment people remember, though they never speak its name. I flipped the big framed photo of our last 10 Thanksgivings face down, the one where I stood behind my mother, tray in hand, smiling for the camera. No more. The next morning the phone rang as I was loading the dishwasher. I picked up. It was Mom. "Sweetie, don't forget to thaw the turkey. I just know you'll make it magical again this year." "No, please. No, thank you." I listened quietly. When the words ended, I whispered, "Not this time," and set the phone down. After lunch, I found myself at the dining table, writing a note. I drafted it, scrapped it, rewrote it. I wrote how for years I cooked with love. But love, I realized, should be mutual. For years I washed dishes while others celebrated. For years I ignored my own rest. For years I asked nothing. This year I asked something simple, that people recognize I existed. So I wrote, "For years I cooked with love. But love should be mutual. This year, I'm not cooking. I'm not cleaning. I'm not attending. I chose peace over performance. I hope you find what you're really hungry for." I placed it under one plate in the center of the table. I folded a napkin into the shape of a bird, my symbol of taking flight. That evening I turned off the lights in the house, save one lamp by the kitchen sink. I looked at every chair, empty, waiting. Every ornament, untouched for weeks. I stepped outside, felt the cold November air on my face. The street was quiet. A neighbor's idle wind chime tinkled. I watched it sway. I thought about the sound of my own voice for the first time in many Thanksgivings. Inside, the curtains flapped. The house felt expectant. Not with welcome, with absence. And as I locked the front door behind me, I heard the echo of my decision reverberate. This is the year I stopped being the backdrop. I walked away into the night. The road stretched out before me, 3 hours of quiet, before chaos found its voice. I pulled out of my driveway at exactly 6:07 a.m., leaving the porch light on the way out as though I'd be back any second. In truth, I didn't expect to return the way I always had. The early morning fog settled low over the hills, giving everything a softened halo, and I found myself listening almost too closely to my own breathing. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my pulse thudded like a drum. The car's heater ticked as I merged onto Route 58. On one side, the sky turned pale pink. On the other side, I left behind the silent table, the stacked dishes, the invisible chair. Will they even notice I'm gone? I wondered aloud, though my voice came soft, swallowed by the closed cabin. I didn't want them to offer thanks or apologies, just presence, part of the story, not the footnote. I stopped at a rest area halfway through. It had a payphone and used but polished, a vending machine, and a bench where I sat for 5 minutes. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, looked at a laminated map, and felt for the first time that I'd given myself permission to rest. The wind rustled through nearby trees, and the freeway noise below felt distant. For years I had been the locator of comfort for someone else's holiday, and now I was letting the stillness settle onto me. When I arrived at the cabin, it was small, with pale cedar siding, lakeview windows, and a porch swing that murmured in the breeze. I felt the weight of that childhood belief cracked or shift into something else. I opened the door with the key Leora had sent, turned on a single lamp, and set a table for one. I placed a simple mic stone plate at the center, a glass, cutlery, and a thick cloth napkin. Then I placed a second setting, just in case Leora arrived. I poured tea rather than wine, soft chamomile that I liked but rarely allowed myself to drink. The notes of steam drifted into the air, and I inhaled deeply. It smelled of peace. My phone chimed, a message from Leora. "I'm proud of you. They'll never see it coming." I stared at it, let the glow fade, and responded, "Thank you for seeing me." I typed slowly, so the words felt real. Then I set the phone down and listened to nothing but the hum of the cabin, the lake's ripple against the shore. At 2:03 p.m. the phone rang. I looked at the screen. Callista. I didn't answer. The call went to voicemail, her soggy voice, attempting casual. "Hey, just confirming. Oven preheated? We'll be there soon." I let it ring out, then let the message sit unheard. Moments later, another call, Mom. Then Zinnia. The pattern repeated, each call shorter, more agitated. My heartbeat tipped up when I saw the missed call badge go above 30, then 40. My thumb hovered, but didn't swipe. I turned off notifications and walked to the dock. Meanwhile, back at the house, the family arrived. My sister Callista pushed open the front door. Immediately the smell of absence hit her. No roasting turkey, no scent of sage stuffing. The hall was quiet, the windows still as glass. She called, "Alone," but heard only the sound of the house breathing. She moved into the dining room and saw the table, one plate, one folded napkin in the shape of a bird, and a handwritten note in cursive I vaguely recognized. My mother's voice rose when she discovered the rest, half-open drawers, spice jars empty, silverware gone. "Eloan, this is not funny," she shrieked. Zinnia checked the kitchen and confirmed. Nothing cooked. She didn't lift a finger. The children, bored of waiting, asked in the living room, "Is Aunt Eloan dead?" I watched all this via message updates, but I didn't feel full guilt. I felt something else, a quiet satisfaction, like a statement delivered without shouting. Their illusion of a perfect holiday shattered in the emptiness I left behind. Back at the cabin, the text came faster now. "Where are you? Is this some kind of joke?" My phone vibrated until I turned it face down and let it rest on the table. One text remained, from Zinnia. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Maybe we really did take you for granted." I stared at it and didn't type. I walked outside, the lake flat as a mirror. I sat on the wooden dock, feet swinging over the edge. For years I had prepared plates, refilled wine glasses, peeled potatoes, waved off fatigue. Tonight, I finally allowed myself to just listen. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting orange light across the glassy surface. A goose cried nearby. I inhaled. I was breathing for me now. Not for a serving tray. Not for their applause. They would likely salvage the day with takeout pizza, a rushed family photo, forced laughs. And for once, I didn't envy them. When darkness gathered, I walked back inside. The cabin felt warm, an oak floor that creaked kindly underfoot, the lamp casting soft shadows. I put the kettle on again, poured more tea, then retrieved a small journal from the drawer. I scribbled 2 lines. They thought I'd miss them. I thought I'd miss it, but I missed me. I closed the book and laid it on the pillow. At midnight, I lay in bed, under flannel sheets, one window open to the still air. I tried not to awake to the whispers that once haunted me, a missed thank you, a friendly face I had never caught my own reflection in. I slept deeply. And when morning came, I stepped outside into the crisp dawn light and inhaled. The world felt lighter. I stepped out onto the front porch of the cabin wrapped in flannel and silence. The chill of late November whispered through the trees, and the lake beyond the dock shimmered like glass under a pale, forgiving sun. For a long moment I didn't move. I just stood there, both hands wrapped around the warm belly of a ceramic mug, steam curling upward toward my cheeks, fogging the morning. No deadlines. No phone buzzing. No list of people expecting things from me by 8 a.m. Just air. Just breath. Just the quiet. It struck me then this must be what peace tastes like. I took a few slow steps across the weathered wood deck, the boards creaking slightly underfoot. The lake breeze carried with it the scent of pine and old smoke, familiar, but distant now. I tilted my mug slightly, twisted the lid open, and brought the coffee to my lips. The heat met the cold air on my skin, and the contrast was oddly comforting. The sting on my cheeks felt like something I'd earned, something that belonged to me and no one else. For years, I'd fill my role like clockwork, slicing apples, kneading dough, setting the table, and wiping it clean long after everyone else had retreated to the couch or the hot tub. I played the part without applause, the dependable daughter, the peacemaker sister, the reliable aunt. The one who made holidays magical not because anyone asked, but because I thought love had to be demonstrated, earned, even owed. And now I was here. No one calling my name. No voices rising in family rooms. No children asking for more pie. Just reeds moving at the water's edge, swaying in rhythm with a life I hadn't allowed myself to imagine until this year. The silence had its own stories. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It carried echoes, the laughter trapped in old photo albums, the backhanded thank yous, the sarcastic compliments passed off as affection. I could still hear my father's voice saying, "We're lucky to have our little helper," after I'd spent 6 hours in the kitchen. The praise used to warm me. Now it felt more like sugar over rust. Back inside, I finally turned my phone face up. 18 missed calls. 47 texts. For voicemails blinking like tiny alarms. The family had noticed. I played the messages in order. First, Callista, sharp, impatient, bossy as ever. "Eloan, you've lost your mind. We'll be at your house in 2 hours unless..." Click. No apology. Just a threat wrapped in faux concern. Zinnia's voice followed, quieter but no less deflective. "We just thought..." She stopped mid-sentence, searching for a justification that never came. I could hear the unease in her breath. Then my mother.
Calm. Controlled. Cold.
"Your sister is crying. The kids are asking where you are. We just wanted a meal together." Just a meal. Just a holiday. Just your time, your money, your energy, your boundaries. My father's voice was last. Fragile in a way I didn't remember. "Your mother's beside herself. At least let us know you're alive." Not one of them asked why I had left. Not one asked if I was okay. Their concern was transactional, coded in fear that their comfort had been disrupted, not that I had been. Then came the final voicemail.
Leora.
I told them everything, she said, her voice steady. You needed backup. I'm not sorry. I played it twice. My heart caught in my throat, then surged. She had spoken.
She had seen me.
Leora, the cousin who always knew how to read between the lines, had taken the receipts I'd quietly buried for years and handed them to the table like a mirror no one wanted to look into.
And she wasn't sorry.
Something deep inside me trembled. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was rage finally making space for validation. But whatever it was, it made me feel visible again. I stood still in the middle of the room and let the quiet fill the cracks. Outside, the lake lapped gently against the dock. Inside, my thoughts slowed to something like clarity. Leora had cracked the facade. She had spoken of the birthday party I threw for Callista's son, entirely out of pocket, of the wedding catering I'd covered as a gift, though I was never listed as part of the bridal party, of the year I peeled 10 pounds of potatoes and wasn't even offered a glass of wine. They hadn't seen the ledger. Now they had. Marcella, our blunt and fearless cousin, had chimed in too. Shock spread like oil in water. Disbelief, defensiveness, then silence. Zinnia left the dinner table. My mother sobbed in the hallway. My father said nothing at all. It was messy. Of course it was. The truth always is. But in the mess, there was also light. That night, as twilight painted the sky in lavender and coal, I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside with a metal bucket of firewood. I lit a match in the pit, watched the kindling catch and swell into flame. The heat kissed my face. I knelt, reached into my bag, and pulled out the Thanksgiving family photo from 3 years ago, the one where I stood at the edge of the frame, smiling while holding a carving knife. I set it in the fire. The photo curled, blackened, then disintegrated. Smoke lifted into the night like memory, leaving the body. I watched until there was nothing left but a soft scatter of ash. I didn't cry. I rarely do anymore. But I breathed out. One long exhale I hadn't known I'd been holding since childhood. In those ashes, I saw the shape of someone new. Someone who didn't measure her value by how many pies she baked or how many times she stayed quiet to keep the peace. Someone who didn't need to be the glue anymore. Maybe I wasn't done with them completely, but I was done being useful and unloved. I whispered it into the trees, just loud enough to make it real. The stars emerged, soft and blinking. The fire waned. I sipped from my now-cooled tea and watched the moonlight ripple across the lake. Here I was, intentionally alone, not abandoned, present in a stillness I had always postponed for others.
And it was enough.
The next morning, I packed my bags, not with the weight of returning, but with the lightness of moving forward. 2 days after Thanksgiving, I pulled into the gravel driveway of the house I used to call home. The tires crunched under slow, deliberate weight as I parked, not in haste, but in clarity. The porch light was still on, as if no one had remembered to turn it off, or perhaps someone hoped it might guide me back. A familiar sticky note flapped slightly in the wind, taped crookedly on the front door. In bold, hurried writing, "Call us." I didn't. Everything inside looked the same. The same quilted bench by the entryway, the same framed photos lining the hallway, smiles stretched across time, and holidays I no longer wished to revisit. The same faded rug I'd picked out years ago, still anchoring the living room like an artifact of forgotten appreciation. But the dining room? That stood different. There, untouched, sat the plates. My plates. Still arranged from Thursday's chaos, food crusted and abandoned. The single plate at the head of the table, where I'd once taken my place every year, carving turkey, pouring gravy, orchestrating what they believed to be a family miracle, held only a note now. My handwriting. Centered, unapologetic. This year, I'm not cleaning up the mess, literally or otherwise. I stepped inside. All I felt was calm. Not a cold, detached numbness, but something firmer. Something like knowing. I carried my bags in slowly, taking my time. I placed them neatly by the hallway bench, then walked to the coat rack and let my fingertips brush against the old brass hooks. My fingers paused over the one I used every year for my apron. I didn't hang anything there. Instead, I moved to the kitchen. I didn't pause. I didn't sigh or hesitate or remember some sentimental story about my grandmother's pie. I simply walked to the sink, lifted a green-rimmed serving bowl, the one that had held my cornbread stuffing since I was 23, and dipped it in hot water. But I didn't scrub. I placed it directly into the drying rack, unwashed, undisturbed. Then I picked up the small teacup I'd used every morning this week, rinsed it gently, dried it with a clean towel from the drawer, and placed it back into the cupboard. That was the only thing I cleaned. Everything else could wait. I had waited long enough. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway. I glanced out the kitchen window. Callista. She stepped out of her car in a rush, hair pulled back tightly, her coat flaring open in the breeze. Her cheeks were flushed, not from the cold, but from fury. She stormed up the porch stairs, barely knocking as she opened the door. She expected a confrontation. She expected maybe tears, or an apology, or a shaky justification about boundaries. She got silence. What the hell was that? She snapped as she crossed the threshold. You embarrassed Mom. You humiliated us. Her voice struck the room like a dish breaking.
Sharp.
Messy. Fragile underneath. I stood still, leaning gently against the kitchen island, arms folded. You embarrassed yourselves, I said simply. You just finally had to see it. I tilted my head toward the fridge, where I had quietly taped 12 years of receipts, catering bills, grocery lists, ingredient costs, wine tabs, decor purchases. Year after year, Thanksgiving after Thanksgiving, money withdrawn from my account without hesitation, and time pulled from my life without thanks. She followed my gaze. Her shoulders drooped slightly. Her mouth opened, then closed. And then she left.
No slamming doors. No goodbye.
Just footsteps and the sound of her engine starting again. Later that afternoon, my parents showed up. Paul and Seraphine. He carried a basket of artisanal bread. She held a bottle of wine. A peace offering or a bribe. Or a poor attempt at performance. My father spoke first. Let's just move past this, he said with a faint, rehearsed smile. Family's family, right? My mother's tone was smoother but more cutting. We were wrong, she said, pausing dramatically. But you were dramatic. There it was. The dismissal behind the apology. The accusation baked into the olive branch. I nodded slowly, took a breath. No, I said. I wasn't dramatic. I was invisible. That's worse. Neither of them replied. Paul looked down at his shoes, the bread basket dangling awkwardly from his hand. Seraphine pressed her lips together, the fine lines at her mouth deepening in a way I hadn't allowed myself to notice before. For once, I didn't try to comfort her discomfort. I let her sit in it. They left the basket on the counter. I didn't touch it. That evening, the group chat pinged. Patricia had posted a meme of a turkey wearing sunglasses with the caption, "Missing our chef." Eyes, Kevin responded, still waiting on that apology, turkey, turkey, followed by a string of laughing emojis. I stared at the screen, felt the familiar sting rise in my throat. Not because it surprised me, but because it didn't. I didn't reply. I left the chat without comment. Instead, I opened a new one. Thanksgiving rotation schedule, 2025, for those who respect my time. I added only Leora and a cousin. The rest? Let them scroll in silence. At midnight, I returned to the dining room. The table stood empty, no centerpiece, no dishes, no mismatched chairs filled with too loud laughter and too quiet resentment. Just polished wood, the faint glint of moonlight through the window, and a single framed quote I had placed in the center. Love doesn't demand servitude. Beside it, a candle, small, flickering. Not lit in mourning, but celebration. I sat down with a glass of water. No ceremony. I didn't need wine. I didn't need company. I needed peace. The silence wasn't empty. It was intentional. I thought of all the years I'd left that table last. The dishes, the sweeping, the strategic emotional buffering. Thanksgiving after Thanksgiving, unnoticed and unthanked. I remembered the ache in my back, the dryness in my mouth, the quiet wondering, does anyone even see me? Tonight they saw me, and it made them uncomfortable.
Good.
Upstairs, the wind rattled the window pane. I stood in my room, now reclaimed, and gazed out into the dark. Something in me surged, not rage, not grief, but certainty. I felt ownership of my space, my voice, my worth. I didn't want apologies. I wanted presence. And maybe one day, if they're lucky, I might offer them grace. But it won't be from obligation.
It will be a choice. For now, I rest.
Not as their helper. Not as their servant. Not as the footnote in someone else's family legacy. I rest as myself, named, seen, and finally unburdened. Tonight, I didn't just reclaim my seat at the table. I reclaimed the right to walk away from it. I thought that would be the end of it until I got a letter from a lawyer. It came on a Tuesday morning, just as the fog was lifting from the street outside my house. The mail carrier slid it through the slot, and it landed on the hardwood floor with a weight that didn't belong to ordinary mail. No return address. No company logo. Just my name written in black ink, a little too neat to be personal, a little too deliberate to be random. I hesitated before opening it. For a moment, I thought it might be from my parents again, another attempt to fix things, maybe an apology shaped like a threat. But the paper inside wasn't personal. It was legal, cold,
Heavy.
It began formally. To Ms. Aloan Morse, beneficiary of the late Margaret Morse estate. I froze. Grandma Margaret. My father's mother. She'd passed away 3 years ago, and I thought everything had been settled. Her jewelry to my mother, her silver to Callista, her house sold to cover remaining debts. But the letter went on. This correspondence serves as notice of a contest to the Will and Trust Amendment dated May 11th, 2018. I read it again. Contest to the will. Someone was fighting it.
And it involved me.
There was a list of names. Callista Morse, Seraphine Morse, Paul Morse, each one filed as contestants. The claim, undue influence upon the decedent by the beneficiary, Aloan Morse. My eyes stung. My throat tightened. They were accusing me of manipulating Grandma, of coercing her. The next paragraph hit like a punch. The contested clause grants Ms. Morse 75% of the estate's remaining value, justified as recompense for years of unpaid labor and domestic service. I sat down slowly, the letter trembling in my hands. My grandmother, the only one who had ever looked me in the eye and said thank you, had done something extraordinary. She'd seen what no one else had. And now they wanted to take it away. I leaned back against the chair, the same one where I'd once written Christmas cards for the family, addressing envelopes that weren't mine. Now this table, this house, this silence, all of it felt like armor. I remembered that day in 2018. Thanksgiving at Grandma's. She had pulled me aside in the kitchen while everyone else laughed in the living room. You give more than anyone alone, she whispered. You do it without asking. I've made sure you're protected. I'd smiled awkwardly, not understanding. I thought she meant emotional protection. I didn't know she meant legal. Now it all made sense. Why Callista had suddenly started visiting Grandma more often after that year. Why my mother had insisted on helping manage Grandma's paperwork. Why my father had avoided talking about the will. They knew. They'd known for years. I walked to the window, staring out at the pale November light. The street was still. My coffee sat untouched. My pulse, though, raced. By noon, the emails began. Callista first. The subject line. Unbelievable. Her message read like a slap. You manipulated her. You used her love against us. How could you? Then Mom, you don't need that money alone. You have no children, no responsibilities. This should be shared. And finally, Kevin, Callista's husband, ever the diplomat. Why don't you just split it evenly? That's the right thing to do. Don't be greedy. I read every line twice. Not one of them said, congratulations. Not one said, "Grandma must have loved you very much." It was all about fairness, but their version of fairness always meant I lost something. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded every email to the address listed on the letter. The law office handling the estate. I wrote just one line beneath. "Please include these in the case file." That evening, my phone rang. A name I hadn't seen in years, Marcella. She was our cousin, a law clerk now. "Eloan," she said softly. "I saw the filing. They're accusing you of coercion." My breath hitched. "So it's real." "It's real," she confirmed. "But they're desperate. I was there. I saw how they treated you. You cooked alone while everyone else drank.
You cleaned while they laughed.
I'll testify if it comes to that." I pressed my palm to my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm, like the beginnings of hope. "You'd really do that?" "I would. Grandma told me once you were the only one who visited without wanting something." That sentence broke me. Tears slid down my face quietly, not from sadness, but from the sharpness of being finally seen. Then Marcella added, "There's more. I found something in my old phone, an audio clip from Grandma's birthday dinner a few months before she passed. She's talking to my dad. She says, and I quote, 'Eloan deserves it all. The rest just show up for cake.'" I laughed through my tears. "She said that."
She did.
"I'll send it to your lawyer." When the call ended, I sat for a long while in silence. The kind that isn't empty but full of everything I had been waiting to hear. The next morning, my lawyer, Miss Hartley, called. "I've reviewed the documents," she said briskly. "We have a strong case. But it'll get ugly. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the framed family photo still sitting on my desk. Thanksgiving 2019, everyone smiling, everyone pretending. I picked it up, stared for one long moment at the version of me in that picture. Apron on, hands behind my back, the helper even in the snapshot. Then I pressed delete on the digital copy in my phone. "I was born ready," I said. "Let them come." Outside, the sky darkened.
A storm was moving in.
The letter still sat open on the counter, the ink glinting faintly under the kitchen light. I folded it neatly, slid it into a file marked Family Business, and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. I felt no fear, just the quiet hum of justice beginning to turn. For years, they took my silence as weakness. Now it would speak in court. The hearing date was set for December 19th. But what they didn't know was, I had one more card to play. December 19th, a date they'd regret forever. I arrived at the courthouse just before 9 a.m., the sky already hinting at snow. My car pulled into a half-empty lot. I walked up the steps with my briefcase in hand, hair pulled back tight, no makeup, suit jacket crisply pressed. My attorney greeted me at the door. "You're the quiet storm today," she said softly. I nodded and stepped inside. The lobby was polished and blue-gray, voices echoing off marble walls, security screens flashing. I passed the family, Callista's face drawn and guarded, Seraphine seated beside her pretending calm. Father Paul to the side, silent and still.
They turned when I walked by.
I didn't look back. I held my head high. We reached the courtroom, found our seats. The gavel hadn't yet fallen. I felt the hum of tension as people murmured. My attorney leaned in and whispered, "You ready?" I took a breath, steady. "I am," I said. The opposing counsel rose. His opening lines were smooth, assertive. He accused me of isolating my grandmother, of undue influence, of taking advantage of her generosity. He painted me as the villain in the family saga. I felt the words, but I did not flinch. Then my lawyer spoke. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Sometimes, love is measured by silence, labor, and who's left alone with the dishes." The courtroom stilled. My heart beat quickly for a moment. Then I felt its rhythm slow, anchored by the truth. As testimonies began, I watched. Witness after witness. My lawyer called Marcella to the stand. She described holidays, me cooking silently, clearing plates while others lounged. Her voice held neither malice nor pity, just truth. When the recording played, The one of Grandma, clear-voiced. They don't even call me unless they want something. Aloan? She's the only one who sees me. The air shifted. Callista gasped. My mother sat rigid, lips pressed. My stomach fluttered like a bird. Then they introduced an old letter, Grandma's handwriting, dated 6 months before she passed. She wrote, I give this gift to Aloan, restoring balance for a lifetime of neglect. I blinked. The judge's gaze softened. The courtroom held its breath. I looked at the family again. They were unprepared for my clarity, for our evidence, for the fact that I knew precisely what I'd done and why. They had thought my retreat meant weakness. It meant planning. When the verdict came, the judge ruled in my favor. The trust stood, the clause stood. I felt the weight lift like the snow clouds parting. Outside the courtroom, the press cameras flashed. My family confronted me. Callista's voice broke through. You're no sister to me. I didn't answer. I simply said, then maybe it's time I stopped acting like one. I turned and walked away, leaving the murmurs behind. And there she was, a stranger, a woman I'd never met until now. She approached quietly. That was powerful. Would you speak at our women's advocacy event next month? I nodded. For the first time since I can remember, I accepted something that was about me instead of my service to someone else. That night, I returned to the house where I grew up. The dining table stood empty, the dishes stowed. I did not light the candles I once arranged. Instead, I placed a single glass of water at the center and sat. No family.
No chows. Just peace.
And a quiet decision of what came next. That night at the old house felt like the closing of a door. I stood at the same dining table, untouched and silent, and whispered to myself what came next would be different.
I didn't know exactly how.
I only knew it would be mine. 15 months had passed. The calendar flipped past December to May to August, and then November returned with its chilly air and nostalgic light. The tree outside my window had shed and regrown its leaves twice, and I felt changed along the way. Thanksgiving arrived again. Only this time I turned its wheel myself. I was in that same craftsman home where I'd once prepared every dish, cleaned every plate, served every guest, and this time I did something new. I set the table for 4. Myself, Marcella, Stephen, and a new friend from the women's shelter I volunteered with, Hannah. No texts from my family. No calls. I discovered that silence can be freeing. I arranged simple place settings. White plates, soft linen napkins folded just so, small sprigs of rosemary for scent, a single candle in the center. I poured myself a glass of cranberry mint water, not wine. For once, I wanted the flavor of calm. When my guests arrived, I welcomed them with warmth, not obligation. Marcella carried a pie she baked herself, pumpkin with a pecan streusel. Stephen brought roasted Brussels sprouts and maple-glazed sweet potatoes. Hannah arrived with a casserole she made in her shelter kitchen, a corn and cheddar bake with fresh thyme. And then I said a small blessing to the ones who cooked without thanks, who stayed silent too long, who finally said no more. I raised my glass and they echoed it. The candle flame flickered in the late afternoon light as the robins' morning songs faded to dusk. We each shared a story. Marcella told about the Thanksgiving when her own family gathered, but she still felt apart, like the guest of honor someone forgot to invite to the table. Hannah shared how she worked 3 jobs and still found time to feed others until she remembered she needed food too. Stephen recalled the year he watched his mother serve but never smile, and then never serve again. I told them about years of invisible service, the sorrow of being thanked only for a turkey, not for a person. Later I rose and said, let's honor those who were overlooked. Let's light candles for them. I passed small tea lights around. Each flame represented someone who cleaned kitchens while others ate, who filled water glasses but never theirs, who held smiles while hearts wept. We lit them together. The room glowed with honesty. It felt like healing. After dinner I walked through the house. The walls held echoes of old laughter and old hurt. But now I listened for new sounds, soft conversation, genuine laughter, not the rehearsed kind that accompanied food. I paused by a sideboard. On top sat my grandmother's old scarf, a silk blend with autumn leaves printed on it. I picked it up, slipped it around my shoulders. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You saw me before I saw myself." I tucked it back. Then I found the landline base hidden in a corner drawer. I pressed the button and heard a faint, scratchy voicemail. My grandmother's voice. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. But you're not. And I hope you remember that you deserve peace. Every damn day." I held the phone tightly. My eyes filled with gentle tears, but I didn't cry. Not out of sadness. Out of recognition. I stepped outside into the chilly evening. Snowflakes drifted slowly, each landing gently on the porch and disappearing. Stephen wrapped a heavy wool blanket around me as we stood by the railing. I looked across the snow-dusted yard. I felt something shift. I smiled. Not the polite, forced smile I offered as a girl in an apron. This was a quiet, full smile of someone who chose herself. We leaned into the winter air, breathing in new beginnings. Later inside, I placed the scarf on the back of a chair, folded the voicemail inscription into my journal. I sat in a chair with the candle from earlier still burning. I thought, sometimes the most radical act of love isn't staying. It's walking away and trusting that real family isn't built by blood, but by who shows up after the storm. The fire crackled in the hearth. The room felt warm in a way it never had when the party ended. The dishes piled, and the laughter turned forced. In the quiet, I sensed the legacy I wanted to pass on. Not a perfect holiday, but an honest one. Not a table full of gratitude I never received, but relationships that respect presence and agency. This year I cooked because I wanted to, not because I had to. I cleared the table when I chose to, and left when I wanted to. They'd called me the family helper, the last one seated, the first one to leave. Now the last 17 Thanksgivings felt like steps in a ladder I finally climbed down from. I stood steadier than ever. Outside the house, the snow fell thicker, muting the world into softness. Inside, the candles reflected shimmering light on the windows. I heard laughter, genuine and warm. I felt peace. And I knew in my bones I was home, not because of ceremony, but because of integrity. Before we end the story, let me leave you with this. Sometimes, choosing yourself means disappointing others. But what's worse? Letting them down, or continuing to let them walk all over you. Alohan's story reminds us that silence isn't always peace, and love should never be confused with servitude. What would you do if your family only valued you when you were useful? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true life stories like this.